I trust that you came looking for a blessing because I believe we can all go away with a blessing. Chapter number 5, the book of James, verse number 1 says, "Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you." This is you'll see what the judgments are in just a moment in these verses. He's not talking about every person that is wealthy, or you know what how you define what rich is. Anybody that has more money than you got. Okay, that's what rich is. I remember as a kid, my cousins, my dad's brothers and sisters' kids, called us the rich side of the family. And I thought we was in poverty. I knew we were in a low enough income that we could get, I guess it was commodities. I don't know what they called them back then, but to get powdered milk and cheese and a few things like that. I know we could get that, but Dad told my mother any of that come into the house, he would throw it out and whip anybody that brought it. He said, we're not going to go on government, the government dole. And but my cousins, because their dads and their mothers were drinking and wasting their money and all kind of stuff, then they looked at us as the rich ones in the family. And I couldn't believe that. So whoever is rich is somebody that makes more money than what you make or what your family's got. But he tells these rich men, and he's going to tell them what their sins are in the next few verses. But he says, now, you just as well start weeping now because the judgment is sure. So let's remember that. God, when he says we're to handle our finances in a certain way, he means it. You might think you're getting by with it now, but you're not getting by with it. Verse 2, "Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Behold, the hire of the laborer who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth. And the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. Ye have lived in pleasure on the earth. You've been wanton. Ye have nourished your hearts as in a day of slaughter." Verse 6, "Ye have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you." Let's go ahead and pray. Father, we're thankful tonight for the Word of God. And Lord, we know these first few verses, they're not really difficult to understand, but it's difficult to think that people act this way. And Lord, we pray that you would bless us tonight with your word, the Holy Spirit, meeting each and every need. Lord, and whatever the needs are in our lives tonight, I ask that you would do so. Lord, that we might go away right with you, have peace in our hearts, and have the joy of the presence of the Holy Spirit, and this week have strength to be able to be good testimonies and witnesses for the Lord Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. We find in these first 6 verses, and I did write this down, the crusty, sinful upper crust. You know, we think of the upper crust, we think about people that have, or at least that was a word that was used, people that have riches or have money or have power or authority. I remember as a kid, we didn't move every time the rent come due, but it kind of seemed like we moved every time the rent come due on a house. Dad would find another place to go, probably not because he didn't have the money, but maybe he was trying to move up, I think, a little bit. And thank the Lord that he was able to move up. And when he got time to buy a house, he went out with his VA loan, got the house that my mother lived in, well, I don't know how many years, but a long time, and before she passed away. And but he went out and bought it. At the end of the first year, he saw how much interest there was and went and got the money and paid it off. Dad always put money back, and so he had enough cash to pay it off. And it wasn't much of a house, and it wasn't much land, but he had enough cash money to just go ahead and pay it off. But maybe the people that's rich are the ones that own a house. That one, actually, the first time I remember having running water. We had a cistern, we had a small bathroom, and couldn't use it during the summer because my mother said it didn't have enough water. But we enjoyed being in a house like that. And we, I guess, moved up into the upper crust. But the rich, those who take their money and use it like they want to use it and not like God intended. Now, we know that we are required to give the Lord his tithe. We know that. I know there are some that don't believe it, and that's all right. When you stand before him, I believe that'll all be straightened out. If you want his blessing, of course you want to be a tither. I believe you need to go beyond the tithe. I really believe that the Lord wants us to tithe to our church. I believe he wants us to help people, and that you get no credit for. They were called alms in the scripture, and of course there were beggars in those days, and I think we're coming back to the beggar days. I see them sitting around Walmart and a few other places and hoping for money. You would help people that couldn't help themselves, and that was something I believe we should have done. In the Old Testament, the Jewish people had to leave the corners of the field. They were not allowed to cut the corners of the field, and anything that fell, that when you was putting it up or whatever that fell to the ground, had to be left for the travelers. Now, traveling was different then. People walked. They didn't have automobiles and all of that. And a handful of grain was a real good thing, for people that in those days. But so they did. They gave to other people. And I believe we'd ought to give towards missions. I don't believe you have to give your whole paycheck. I think you need to be wise and ask the Lord what you should do. But I believe you should do so. Missionaries need our support. As godly of people as they are, it doesn't rain dollar bills or silver dollars down on missionaries. They need our support. We've been looking at giving extra funds to our missionaries. It's a difficult time. The economy around the world is not good. Gasoline is still going up around the world. Now here, my son said he got some cheaper the other day, so maybe it's going down a little bit, but it's still a tough time, and we need to think about that. God intends for us to do those things, but all 100% is his. The rest of it, he wants to see how you use, whether you use it wisely or not. We do need to put up some for the evil days ahead. There's a proverb, in fact, there's two proverbs that talks about the wise man that sees the evil afar off and how he avoids it. It doesn't tell you that it's the old age days that you need to put up some money to be able to live on once you're out of the work age. We don't live together like families did, especially in Israel. They lived on the same property and everything together, and the boys would move off just a little ways, build their homes and tents, whatever time frame it was, and Dad was always taken care of, Mom was always taken care of by the people there. And what a blessing it is when you can take care of people, when you live close to family, when you are close enough to them that you can actually, step up and say, Mom, Dad, what you need. Now, you don't hold them, to you do what I tell you and I'll help you. It's not that way. You just do for them what needs to be done once they get to a certain age. You take care of them. So he's telling them in the first verse there that you need to go ahead and start crying. You need to start wailing out because your judgment is sure. And there's a lot of verses in the Old and New Testament that give us the responsibility and even the judgment that comes upon these people who misuse their money. You say, well, you know what? I'm glad I'm not rich. No, I didn't say it was just the rich. How do you use your money? You may have half of what they have. You may have a tenth of what they have. But how do you use your money? What do you do with it? Do you waste it? Do you throw it away? Do you spend it going to the arcades Do they even have arcades anymore? Oh, they do, okay. Spend it going to the arcade, spending all your money. I can remember seeing some of those boys and girls get to that crank thing trying to win something in there, and they'd spend all the money they had. I know I've got it this time. Or they would try to beat somebody's score on one of the other games. Of course, some of us are Pac-Man days, and we're not in the newer age. But all of those things, and they spend the money on that, and then they don't have anything. When I was working in South Louisiana, pastoring there and working, those guys that I worked, the crew that I would work, every day one of them would come to me and say, "Rev, can you help me out a little bit? I went to the casino last night. Now I don't have any money." I said, "Go to the casino and ask them." "Yeah, but Rev, I'll pay it back when I get my check." Yeah, if you got there when they got their check, they'd pay you back. And they just knew that the big boss that wrote the checks, they just knew that he had money to throw away, and so it didn't matter. They was going to spend theirs and try to get some more their own way. It's sad. Verse 2 said, "Your riches are corrupted, your garments are moth-eaten." And there's not good money and bad money. There's just what you do with the money that's good and bad. Some things are not sinful, they're wasteful. Some things, the Bible tells us in the book of Hebrews to lay aside every sin and the weight which doth so easily beset us. And there's sometimes what you spend it on is not a sinful thing, but it's just a silly thing. It's just something that you didn't have to spend it on, and you didn't have any money left over. I think about the bulletin this morning. I don't remember if it was on the back page, if it was inside there, but about the little boy going to the restaurant. And he wanted an ice cream sundae. He asked the waitress, what he could get an ice cream sundae for. And I don't remember what she told him. It was 35 cents. I don't remember. And then said, "Well, what could I get just a plain ice cream?" And she said 20 cents. So he said, "Bring me the plain ice cream." And when he left, of course, she was kind of frustrated. She wasn't going to get no big tip or nothing. And all she could think about was seating other customers and treating them real nice so that they could get their big tip. Now, I'm reading a lot into that story, by the way. And when it's all over with, he goes and he pays his money and pays his 20 cents. And when she goes to clean the table, she gets over there and there's 15 pennies, 15 cents stacked up, one on each other for her tip. He didn't get his ice cream sundae. He got a plain ice cream so he could be polite and leave her 15 pennies. Yeah, he didn't waste it. He got a reward, I'm sure, in many different ways from the Lord for being that kind of a person, knowing that he could have eaten the ice cream sundae. And I'll be honest, had I been that kid, I'd ate the ice cream sundae. Okay? But there are kids like that do what really is the best to be done. It's not moth-eaten. It's not, the money itself is not bad. It's what you do with it and how you treat it. If you think it's yours, then you're not going to do everything like you should. If you think it's all God's and he's put you in charge of it, then you'll probably do right. Your gold and your silver, they're cankered, they're worm-eaten, they're rusty, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and ye shall and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Now, I'll stop there. I don't know if that's where my dad and others said, you get a little money and it burns a hole in your pocket. I don't know if that's where somebody thought up that from this or not, but it'll eat you up just like it was fire. You have heaped up treasure together for the last days. And, you've heaped up treasure for you for the last days. But what is that treasure going to be for you? If you're not right and you're not saved, that treasure's not going to do you a bit of good. And that treasure may become your judgment when your blessing becomes your curse. And this may be what it's talking about. Verse 4, "Behold, the hire of the laborer who have reaped down your fields, which is of you kept back by fraud, crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of the Sabbath. And every time I read this verse and several others, I think about the time as a kid we were helping put up hay. And I wasn't a big kid. I was a skinny guy. And I couldn't throw those bales up because you got the height of the wagon. And then I could throw them up to that too. And I really had to work to get it to throw onto the top one. But a farmer that came by and asked Dad, could we work for him? And he said, what do you pay? And he told, and I'll be honest, I don't remember. I think it was 3 cents a bale. I think is what it was, 3 cents a bale. And Dad said, now, is that 3 cents for every bale he loads? Or is that 3 cents of total bales? He said, total bales. He said, I pay everybody 3 cents a bale. If we put up 100 bales, then it'll be $3. And boy, we put up a bunch of bales. I don't remember what it was. But when we come home, my dad said, how much did he give you? And I told him, he said, how many bales did you put up? I said, well, this is what he said. He said he didn't pay you all the 3 cents a bale. So he went down there. And fella, he was in a bind. He didn't have us take them all the way in and load them in the hayloft because he didn't want to pay us like he said he was going to. And so when Dad got there, he said, Mr. Russell, is there a problem? He said, you didn't pay my kids what you said. He said, well, the other kids was bigger, so I paid them less. My dad said, you bargained with them for 3 cents a bale and you put it in my hand or we're going to fight. And sure enough, he put the money in Dad's hand. And then he asked, could we come back and help him get the bales up into the hayloft because it looked like rain? And my dad said, no. Should have done that when you had those boys here. And 2 or 3 wagons got rained on that night because he couldn't put them up. He lost what he had trying to cheat us on just a few. And I know 3 cents a bale don't sound much for you today, but it was a pretty good bit back in those days. And but here he held it back and kept back a part of it by fraud, just like this fella here did. And it says that the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabbath. And of course, the cries, when I think about that, of course, we say sometimes talk about the law of first mention in the Bible. If you see a subject in the New Testament, you don't understand it, and I think we do understand this, but if you don't understand it, you go back to the Old Testament and you start in the very first and see where the first word cries, or one of its derivatives, what it says. And what it says is, thy brother's blood crieth out. Injustice cries out to God. Any type of injustice. And we sometimes think we've gotten by with it simply because we didn't get caught. And we think we've gotten by with it. And we haven't gotten by with it. Payday is not always the day you get your check. Payday is not always with what you've got in your hand. Payday is when it's all taken care of and God lays it out in front of you. And he's found that out here. He said, you have lived in pleasure on the earth. You have been wanting. You have nourished your hearts. And that you have been wanting. In other words, they've desired. This fellow's desire was to have. That was his desire. And that was his motivation. He was wanting in these things. And it says, you have nourished your hearts, not the hearts of the workers. You have nourished your hearts, and what does it say? As in the day of slaughter. Well, when I first read that, being I'd been military, and I'd read up, and I watched a lot of cowboy and Indians growing up, and you think about that kind of slaughter, that's not what it's talking about. I can remember the day of slaughter when I was a kid, and that's when we slaughtered hogs, or when we slaughtered calves, or whether we had been fishing on the creek bank and we'd caught a bunch of fish and we was cleaning them, dressing them out, putting some in the freezer for the winter months, and but the rest of them there. That day we slaughtered hogs, there was fresh pork that day. The one thing, and I love fresh pork, I'm telling you, It just never loved me. I don't know if it did y'all the same way. We had an outhouse. Sometimes my brothers and I was glad there was more than one seat in that outhouse, because that's what fresh pork does to me. But I could eat a ton of it. And my grandmother would, and the other ladies would cook that stuff up. In the day of slaughtering hogs, we had a time, we had a feast, and we ate like we didn't eat except Thanksgiving and Christmas the rest of the year. And so they was eating that away, nourishing themselves, taking care of themselves. In verse 6, you have condemned and killed the just, and he doth not resist you. Verse 6 is still talking about the rich man, what they have done, that have cheated. You see, these are not good people. These are people that have made a lot of money, maybe inherited a lot, whatever, however they got it, but they treated other people like they were unworthy. That was not uncommon in that day. Any place where there was a king and a kingdom, or a queen and king and their kingdom, generally there was the ruling class, and then you got down to everybody else way down there. No middle class. America is one of the few nations that has a great, not just good, but a great middle class. What's wrong with Mexico? They don't have a great middle class. That's why their economy goes up and down, and many other countries. That middle class is what we pay more taxes. Now the rich people pay a lot, not compared to what we pay, but they do pay a lot. But at the same time, the middle class, there's so many of them that they take care of a lot of taxes for other people. These upper crust, the crusty upper crust, the sinful upper crust, mentioned verses 1 through 6. Then it says in verse 7, be patient therefore. He's not talking to that upper crusty middle class anymore. He's talking to the rest of us. He's talking to those that had been cheated. He's talking to the families of those who had been killed and left behind, like David had the man killed in the military, in the army, at a battle, and he's talking to their families, members, and the friends, and all of those. He's talking about to everybody else. He said, be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. You see, there's coming a different day. There's coming a day when Jesus will rule and reign in righteousness on this earth. And there will be judgment to clear up and take care of all of the other sin and stuff that's going on. And so we are to be patient. There's a passage of Scripture that tells us, vengeance belongeth unto the Lord. Now, why is it important that we know that? There's so many bad things happening, and most of us, especially us men, if something happens to one of our children, man, we won't take care of it right now, and we won't take care of it our way. Vengeance belongeth unto the Lord, and we have to be careful. There's coming a day when God is going to straighten out all things like that. It belongs to Him. If you step into the shoes of the judge of this world, then you've got to pay the price for that. Those are His shoes. You're taking His place. We're to be patient, therefore, brethren, unto the coming of the Lord. Behold, the husband waiteth for the precious fruit of the earth, and hath long patience for it, until he receive the early and latter rains. You see, we need to be like the farmer. We need to be like those that go out, they've got their field ready. Now, back home, generally, once the last crops are taken in, they turn all of that just with a turning plow. They don't disc it up, because there's going to be rain and there's going to be snow. Snow, I think, brings nitrogen, if I remember correctly. And so when they plow those furrows, they leave them open so that snow will go down in there, and it'll build up the nitrogen in there. Of course, you can plant peas and things, and it'll build it as well. But the corn has taken it out. Other things have taken it out. And boy, you keep plowing and you're working, and very few winter crops, unless you got winter wheat, there's very few winter crops back home. And so strawberries is not a winter feasting on the crop, but the summertime is not hot enough, early enough generally, for the good variety of strawberries. They have to be planted in the fall before the cold times come, and then you have to cover them with straw You can use hay, just straw doesn't have the seed in it, and you cover them with straw, and next spring when you think it's the last frost or whatever, boy, you uncover them, and it won't be but a few weeks they'll start blooming, and then a little bit later you'll get those good sweet strawberries off of it. But you have to wait. You just have to wait. It's not like when kids, they plant something to go out every day looking at it and wondering why in the world it's not there. When are they going to get something off of that? There are some things that take a long time. I think the longest bearing fruit tree, the longest that it takes, is pears. The saying is that if you're going to plant trees for your heirs, then plant pears, because it takes more years for them to produce a harvest than all of the other. And so you've got to be like the farmer. You've got to understand that you're not going to get payday today, and those who do you wrong are not going to get payday today. Now, some will, but the majority of them won't get payday for a long time down the road. So we're to be patient for the waiting of the coming of the Lord. And Christians, have been patient for 2,000 years. And so we're patiently waiting like the farmers wait. And the farmer, the good thing, the illustration about the farmer is that farmer stays busy. Boy, you think, man, farmers have got it easy. As soon as that fall crop comes in, all they got to do is sit around and wait till the spring. That's not the way it works. My grandfather, he just truck farmed 19 acres, but he was busy all winter long. And if it wasn't in the farm itself, it was on the farm equipment and getting everything ready and doing all the other work that was involved. And you just stay busy with it, and you just continue to stay busy. And you do that in your Christian life. You just continue to stay busy, and God is going to bless you in His time and in His day. After they received the early and the latter rains. And in Israel, there was always the early and the latter rains, and it took both rains in order for their crops to come in. Verse 8, be also patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. Talks about the coming of the Lord. He talks about working like the farmer works, and then he says, the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. So establish your hearts. Get your heart set on some things. Make sure that your heart is set, not just your mind. You see, the Word of God and the Christian life is not about what we know. It's about what we have in our heart. Is the Lord in your heart? Have you truly been saved? It's not what you know. Well, Jesus came and He died on Calvary. He resurrected the third day. So, yeah, I believe that. But what is it in your heart? Is it real in your heart, not just in your head? You've got to trust Him with all of your heart. And, excuse me, but it says that we are to, if I can get back to that place there, be patient. Verse 8, establish your heart, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. And the coming of the Lord not only brings the blessings. The Lord said, behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me. So it's not just the reward that we're going to get when we meet Him. It's the judgment of the unbelievers as well. We will be vindicated for those who have accused us of wrongdoing and made lies up about us. We will be vindicated. The judge is going to come and take care of every part of that. Verse 9, grudge not one against another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth before the door. I believe the judge there again is the Lord. He's standing at the door waiting for the Father to say, go get your bride. And so we should not be grudging one against another. He said, brethren, children of God, not just brother and sister in the family, but brother and sister in Christ. We should not be grudging one against the other. We shouldn't find complaints, and we shouldn't find wrongdoing against one another. Now, if somebody's doing wrong and needs to be taken care of, that's a totally different story. Just make sure it's your responsibility to take care of it. But here he tells them that we are not to grudge against people, brethren, because we're going to be the one that's condemned for the wrong spirit that we have towards other people. I've said this many times. at a youth camp, you know, you'd always have 2 or 3 tattletales. And if you had 100 kids, you'd have 5 or 6 or even 10 tattletales in the group, especially if it was juniors. Teens, it wasn't as bad. But you'd be going somewhere. Of course, when the kids was off doing something, my job was sometimes to go check the pool, check the pH level and all the rest of that, and make sure it's going to be ready for them. Or maybe my job was to go up and ask the kitchen help, you know, what do you need? Do you need anything here, there, or yonder? It was to go to check the refreshment stand, take care of an electrical problem, whatever it was. So I was always going one place or the other. And one of them little ones, if I got close to a group, they'd run up to me and tell me, you know what old so-and-so said? You know, and they'd tell me about one of their friends who said something they shouldn't have said. I said, now look, don't be a tattletale. If the counselor was there, the counselor heard it, and the counselor will take care of it. Don't be a tattletale. And it wouldn't be long. I'd go somewhere else, and there'd be another one run up to me and tell me something that one of them did. And I was glad one time because one of them came up to me and told me, my counselor went out of the cabin last night. I said, really? Do you know where they went, what they did? No, but I know when he come back, his face was red. I said, his face was red. So that night I stayed up. I usually went home about 11 o'clock and tried to sleep a couple hours, come back about 5. I stayed up. And I walked around with all the lights off. There was complete windows all the way around the shelter house. And I kept watching. I heard a little noise. And then I heard out of the girls' cabin the little noise. And all of a sudden, there was 2 counselors. And they was a hugging and a kissing after everybody else went to bed. I opened the door, and they took off like rabbits. They got out of there. I knew who they were. And the next morning, I was sitting down at the breakfast table. I didn't have to say anything. They come up to me and apologized. I said, if it happens again, I told him I was going to break his neck. I told the girl, I'm going to tell your daddy. That was the end of it. They didn't get up anymore. They had fallen in love in just 2 days, I guess, or what? No, they'd been together for weeks at that time. But I'm glad one of them told. But anyway, we need to not be grudging, not be tattletales. Verse 10, take my brethren, the prophets. I wanted you to think about the prophets who prophesied 1,000 years ago. Now, at that time, they hadn't prophesied 1,000 years ago. So, but the last prophet was 400 years before Christ. And so that prophet had prophesied, and for 400 years, a lot of things had not taken place as God said they would. Think about the prophets that put their neck on the line, that go out there and say, thus saith the Lord, and you don't see it come to pass. See, it's not in our time, it's in God's time. And we have to learn to be that kind of patient and wait. You say, I think of a lady that passed away many years ago. Her son he was weeping his eyes out. And as all of us do when our mamas pass. And he said, Mama prayed all her last years that she'd see every one of her children back in church. And she didn't get to see them all back in church. I said, yeah, but she will get to see it when they do get in church. He said, how's she going to see it then? I said, I don't know, but the Bible says that there's a great cloud of witnesses in heaven. And I think the Lord lets them know when their children get saved or get right. And boy, it just changed his whole thought about that whole thing. And he was his brother's thorn in the flesh until his brother got right with God. Because he wanted Mama to know that boy was in church. And I say, boy, they was older than I was. Think about those things. Goes on and says, who have spoken in the name of the Lord for an example of the suffering, affliction, and of patience. Behold, we count them happy which endure. Now, wait a minute. Don't we count them happy? Should we not count ourselves happy? We've done the will of God, and it hasn't happened, and we count them happy. They endured. We need to count, ourselves happy. even if we have to endure for a long time before we get the answer to our prayer. We don't always get a quick answer to prayer. So we need to count ourselves happy that we have a God who hears and answers prayer. And it says, and have seen the end of the Lord, that the Lord is very pitiful and of a tender mercy. But above all things, my brethren, swear not, and we'll finish here, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by the earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation. Years ago, before I did any studying, I preached out of this verse here, saying that you needed to keep your language clean. And I remember that I did that because I've written it down on some notes. And I've never thrown those notes away because I know I misused this verse. It's not talking about taking God's name in vain. It's not talking about using curse or words that are not quality words, although that would fit here, but that's not what it's talking about. It's talking about taking an oath. It's talking about promising things. And I'm going to tell you, I've studied this verse a number of times, and I don't have an answer for exactly why it is the way that it is. I read something that some Jewish rabbis have said about this particular verse, and I still don't understand it clearly. But I know that it boils down to this one thing. We have no authority to promise something. When you promise something, you've got to have the authority to make it come to pass. And only God has the authority to make something come to pass. And that's why we generally say the Lord's will. We generally say, I'll be there at a certain time, unless something goes haywire. People ought to trust us because they know us, rather than us say, I promise. Because when you ask somebody to promise, and I remember a few of the times that I've gotten up in court as a witness and different things, I'd get up there, and I'd already sent word to the judge that I would not use the word I swear. I would not do it. Because I said, I don't know how to exactly use that Bible verse, but I want to tell you that I'll give the truth as I know it. Now, if I don't know the truth, I'll give you what I know. And that was always good for the judges. They said, well, that's your promise. I said, as close to the promise as I can give you. I said, I don't know that everything that I know is true. I can only tell you what I know. And that's always been good for them. Well, I had one judge who wasn't going to do it, going to put me in jail for contempt of court. And I said, I'm sorry, but I just can't go that far with it. Now, if you get up and you do that and say, yes, I swear, that's all right with me. I'm the one that has the problem with it, not you. And we just have to be careful. What is my authority? What can I put out there to say, I swear that I'm telling you the truth? You know, the only thing that I have is my life's testimony that I've been a person of truth. And they don't know whether that's the case or not. And so I'll do some more studying on this. I don't know if we'll start there next week. I have no idea whether I've needed to start in chapter 5 tonight. We've skipped nearly 3 chapters to get here. But that's where I felt led to be tonight, and I trust it's been a help to you. Let's bow our heads.